Evening all. So welcome everyone to episode 42, Shark Attack Case Files. So today we're going to go back over towards New Zealand and take a look at some attacks which took place quite a ways away from New Zealand, just off the east coast of New Zealand. This small group of 10 islands here. So the main island here is Chatham Island, and then you've got Pitt Island here, and then a bunch of smaller islands. So yeah, quite crazy. This small island here, you wouldn't obviously associate it with great whites, and to be honest, before I researched this, I'd never heard of it. So yeah, it's an island of a population only of about 780 people, only got like one doctor. It was originally sort of founded by Pacific Islanders, sort of Maori type tribes, and people still live on there today. In terms of statistics, yeah, there's just been 3 attacks here. They're all non-fatal, but they're all really interesting attacks. You can see them listed there. So there's one took place in year 2019, one in 1996, and one in 1995. Yeah, all non-fatal. But yeah, 3 attacks, and they sort of fall under the New Zealand statistics. So if you remember back a couple of episodes ago, we looked at New Zealand, and there's been 50 case files in New Zealand, so 19 fatalities and 31 non-fatalities in New Zealand. So these 3 non-fatal attacks here fall into those 31 non-fatal cases from New Zealand, so they're part of those statistics. And also, if you remember from that video, we looked at sort of a study of tagging sharks that took place between the year 2000 and 2008, and they actually managed to tag 10 sharks off Chatham Island. And I'll pop up a video of a while I'm talking about this, I'll put up a video of a shark filmed off Chatham Island feeding on a whale carcass. So yeah, so these 10 sharks here, interestingly enough, they didn't mix with the sharks from New Zealand. So it's like a distinct population of sharks basically exists on Chatham Island. And then during the winter months there, they move around sort of north towards sort of Tonga, Kermadec Islands, even right out into the Pacific, and then back again seasonal. But there will be some larger sharks who stay here all year round basically, and there's quite large seal populations there. So that's basically what they're feeding on. So yeah, just jumping into it, just going to look at this first attack. We're just going to basically go through all 3 of these attacks because they're all really interesting, even though they're non-fatal. So this first attack took place off Chatham Island. It's just a North Island, just in this bay here. So dating back to 1995, November the 29th on a Wednesday. And Keena Scully is a guy, 22 years old. He was diving for abalone, and he was attacked by a large 5 metre, 15 foot great white. And this attack took place during the day. They don't give specific details on the time, but there was in 18 metres of water, which is about 16 feet, and they were close to shore. Moon phase, third quarter. Water temperature is about 13 degrees that time of year, 55 Fahrenheit. And this attack was like a non-fatal, probably, it could have been mistaken identity or a sort of territorial attack, or even an investigation type bite. But so he was diving for abalone. That's the main narrative. So these guys are on board this boat, Keena Scully and a guy called Tim Gregory Hunt. Those 2 were diving. There's a few other people on board, and they'd actually finished diving, and this guy Keena, he actually made a bet with some of the guys on the boat that he could snorkel down to the bottom, so 18 metres, 60 feet. He could snorkel down 60 feet and actually grab a sort of stone from the bottom and bring it back up. So it's sort of like a little bet he made with his friends, just messing around. So he actually done this. He dived all the way to the bottom. He actually grabbed this stone while he was down there. I'll bring a stone back up, proved to them that I got to the bottom. And as he was then making his way back to the surface, this great white came in from the side and sort of hit him around the midsection. And this guy thought, he's sort of done for here. But actually, as it grabbed him on the midsection, it mainly got his diving belt, and the diving belt took the main brunt of the force. And then this guy actually used the stone to hit the shark. So he's hitting the shark with a stone, and then the shark came back round and sort of ripped into his leg and his thigh and his knee, causing a lot of sort of blood to go into the water. And then he sort of hit the surface, and just yelled shark, obviously. And then he said, like, his friends heard him say, yeah, don't let it get me, don't let it get me. And they actually managed to pull him on board quite quickly. And then they'd actually just installed a new VHS radio, and they sent out a signal to Pitt Island and they managed to sort of like get him in an air ambulance, took him to Christchurch hospital as quick as they could. And yeah, luckily this guy survived. He had to have like emergency surgery because he had obviously extensive sort of gashes, stuff like that. But he made a full recovery, luckily enough. And he actually went on to become a conservationist and carried on diving, and actually done some shark documentaries on the documentary channel. So this guy was like an advocate for sort of shark conservation, which is good. So yeah, that's a story of that guy. Obviously extremely lucky in a very isolated location. And then the next one, which took place sort of just in the same area, Waiheke Bay, Chatham Island, New Zealand. This one took place 1996, Friday the 6th of November. And this guy, Vaughan Hill, 23, he was diving for abalone again. He was attacked by another 5 metre great white, 10 o'clock in the morning. The water depth here was shallower, so 2 to 4 metres, about 7 to 12 feet. It was about 100 metres or 109 yards offshore, moon phase, waning gibbous, and water temperature is roughly the same, 55 degrees Fahrenheit, 30 degrees C. This was probably like a non-fatal stroke territorial type attack, possibly mistaken identity, because the actual water was very murky in that particular area. So it's a quite shallow water, and the water was particularly murky. So I say diving for snails, that's sort of abalone type of snail, but anyway, it was abalone. So yeah, the narrative here is like, he was just in this shallow water diving, and because the visibility was so bad, he initially just sort of like felt something like rub past him at speed, and obviously that was the shark. And he said all he could think of was trying to get some air and then come back down to actually like fight the shark. So he did remain quite cool. He thought, I'm not going to go to the surface straight away. But the shark came back quite quickly and bit him around the midsection, and then came back again, and then actually took his arm, basically. So it took his wrist and part of his arm up to his shoulder, like clean off. So he was missing an arm. And I believe at that point he sort of lost consciousness, sort of came to the surface. But then he was obviously retrieved from the water, obviously bleeding quite heavily. And again, because of the remote area, he was taken to the local doctor, I guess the only one on the island, over to the Pitt Island settlement. They managed to get him on board a bigger boat, take him there, sort of a 20-minute trip to get him to the island hospital. And then he was sort of going in and out of consciousness at that point. They managed to band him up before they could airlift him, and he was sort of flown then onto sort of Wellington for further treatment. But he'd lost like loads of blood. But two blood donors travelled with this guy to try and keep getting blood into him, because he was like bleeding that severely. But he did again. He made a full recovery. But this guy, I believe, he spent 3 weeks in a coma, and then he spent 4 months in the hospital, then a further 2 years as a day patient. So that he got completely ruined by the shark. He had all nerve damage. Obviously, he lost his arm. Obviously, the shark took that, but he had continuing problems with nerve damage. And also, this guy took a different view to the first guy. He sort of like said that he want all sharks killed after this attack. But I mean, he just unfortunately paid the piper, and so you can't really blame the sharks. So there's a little bit of a bad attitude there from that guy. He's just like he should count his lucky stars he survived. And then the third attack actually took place on Pitt Island. So this guy Val Crone was attacked also by a great white, but a smaller one, sort of 3 meters, sort of 10-foot shark. He was diving again. This was 2019, July the 17th on a Wednesday. During the day, there's no time given, and again a little bit more shallow water, so 2 to 3 meters, 7 to 10 feet of water close to shore, full moon phase, water temperature a little bit colder that time of year, maybe 12 degrees, 53 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, possibly a non-fatal sort of territorial type attack. And again, another thing to mention is it's like all three of these attacks were close to seal colonies, so you work out the math. So the narrative for this one is that they basically moored up during the day to dive for these abalone, and these guys have gone in, but this time this guy, like the first two were just sort of free diving with snorkels, but this guy was actually wearing tanks. So like Val Crone, he was wearing sort of full sort of tank gear. Yeah, and he'd been underwater about 15 minutes just searching for these abalone. He'd filled up his sort of third bag. Then all of a sudden he was just hit on the side by this shark, this great white, and he was dragged sort of 7 or 8 meters through the water, then sort of thrown about, sort of like thrashed side to side. He said it was like getting hit by a freight train. He just literally didn't see it coming, but he sort of tried to stay as calm as he could, and he actually got out his like hook, what they use for plying up the shells from the bottom, and he just tried to dig his hook into whatever he could reach, which was the shark. So he was just sort of digging this hook in wherever he could. He didn't know what part of the shark it was, and it actually made the shark let go. So the shark was like, yeah, I ain't having this, is not for me, there's nothing to eat here. So it sort of let go. And he said he just remembers hyperventilating, sort of looking round. The water was just sort of full of blood, but he said he couldn't tell whether that had like bit his arm or bit his back or bit his leg, so he wasn't even sure whether he was injured or not. I guess there's so much adrenaline, it just acts like an anesthesia and you can't feel anything. But he sort of realised he wasn't actually sort of injured. The shark had actually grabbed his sort of tank and at the back of his sort of suit, and just shook the hell out of him basically, and then let him go because he was sort of digging into him with the hook, and there's sort of part of his sort of suit and all the webbing that goes around it. And that guy obviously just made a full recovery. Yeah, no injuries. So yeah, I mean, and all 3 of these guys were really lucky, particularly the second guy. Like I said, this guy here, the Vaughan Hill guy, he suffered quite badly. Like I said, he's in a coma for like 3 weeks, like in hospital for 4 months. I mean, this shark like pretty much killed him, and he was lucky to survive with those blood donors and stuff. That's the same with this first guy here, Kina. He was lucky as well. It's like a really large shark, and he was fortunate to survive, basically. So yeah, I mean, just interesting that these isolated islands, you know, out in the middle of nowhere, you wouldn't associate with great whites, have quite good populations of great whites. So yeah, that's the video for today. Laters.